let's just get straight to it. As many of you have heard, Conor McGregor was found liable for a 2018 sexual assault in Dublin, Ireland. We've covered this story on MMA Junkie, and I encourage you to go read it. In short, after the trial that took about 2 weeks, a jury returned a verdict that includes awarding damages to a young lady named Nikita Hand, 250,000 euros, approximately. Hand is the young lady who claimed she was sexually assaulted. Nolan, let's hear from you first on this one. Not an easy one to tackle, but that's our job. Let's get to it.
Yeah, it was certainly, first of all, I want to say, a shout out to all the journalists over there that were in the courtroom. I think for a lot of us here, we weren't able to, get any sort of live stream or have access to it. So I think the coverage over there, they did a very excellent job of portraying what was going on in that courtroom. But yeah, for about 2 weeks, this was going on, this civil suit. I know we had heard about it a couple years ago. There was some rumblings, some rumors that there was an Irish sports star that was going to get, had been accused of sexual assault. We didn't really know who it was. There was some speculation it might be Conor. And then ultimately a New York Times report comes out that says, hey, it was him. This woman's going to sue him civilly. She's looking for this. I think since then, maybe there's been so much that's gone on with Conor McGregor, right? There's been all sorts of accusations. There was the thing that happened at the Miami Heat game. There was something that happened on a boat. There's been all sorts of stuff, right? I don't think I need to bring everybody through everything that Conor's, legal history is certainly out there for all that wants to punch it into Google. But, since that time, I think that was whatever it was, 6 years ago or something. So it kind of fell back in people's brains. But more recently, when this date was approaching, I think, more details were coming out. And then each day, being able to hear and through these journalists in Ireland, kind of what was going on in there. It was certainly, there was a lot of disturbing details. I think it seemed like a very emotional, high tension sort of setting with people on both sides and the paparazzi and the attention that this was getting in Ireland. Conor speaking about this, for the first time, being cross-examined, the man that was also accused of this, that was not found liable, James Lawrence, him speaking about it publicly, Nikita Hand, the victim, getting up there and speaking about it emotionally. And then all the cross-examination that comes with it, right? All the evidence. There was, pictures of bruising on her and some of the, hearing her details of her accounts of going to the hospital and some of the medical professionals that treated her. There was CCTV surveillance footage of her with James Lawrence and McGregor in the hotel. And so the jury, heard a lot of different information at certain times. The judge asked everybody the jury to leave the courtroom so that he could talk to the two sides about what could be used as evidence, what couldn't be, what shouldn't be said. And then ultimately the day before the jury went into deliberations, or maybe the morning of the afternoon where they went to deliberations, the judge kind of spoke to them about the different things that he thinks they should take into account. And it wasn't specific details of like, I thought that this person had a good point or that person had a good point. But one of the things he was saying was he felt like people should, or the jury should lean on the evidence that didn't have any potential for bias. So that would be, the photographs of the injuries. That would be the CCTV surveillance footage. So ultimately, after about a day of deliberations or so, it wasn't typically too long, the 8 women and 4 men that were in the jury determined that McGregor was liable and that James Lawrence was not. Awarded Nikita Hand about $260,000 American. I believe it was like 250,000 euros. And ultimately, McGregor's come out and said that he's going to appeal this decision. I think there's a hearing next week about, how who's going to pay for what with legal fees and things. So this is still ongoing a little bit, but I think, like any sort of legal proceeding in the US, this is a big deal. This is a big decision. It's a big mark on Conor McGregor and his legacy, I think. There's been a lot of accusations, but there hasn't been really much that's gone to this level, right? So now, unless he appeals it and it gets overturned or whatever, I mean, this is going to be something that goes down as part of his story.
Yeah. And Joseph Boza in the chat, real quick, not that it's the most important thing of what we're discussing, but I made this mistake earlier. The equivalent is not 313,000. I think you might have done it according to pounds. And this jury's awarded the damages in euros. So what Nolan said is closer to, because the euro and the dollar, like I said, not that important. I don't know why I went down that road. Mike Bond, how about your thoughts, man? You've covered this guy pretty much from the beginning. I would almost say your career is kind of parallel a little bit. Your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, Nolan covered everything great there in terms of laying out the timeline and everything. Did a great job with us internally, kind of updating us each day on what was going on. So we were all following along pretty closely. But now that we're here, obviously, you just wonder how the dominoes are going to continue to fall or what that looks like, right? We had the Hitman video game where Conor was like a special downloadable character or something come out this morning and say that he's being pulled from like all content there. You wonder if that's just going to be it, or if that's the tip of the iceberg with all these other brands that he has associated to his name. But of course, the big question is the biggest brand associated to his name, which is the Ultimate Fighting Championship, right? How are they going to act around this or respond? We reached out to the company for statements when the verdict was reached, have not got anything back on that regard. So I'm sure the next time maybe it does get heard of on something on their end is like Dana White will probably do some interviews in the lead up to the pay-per-view next week, UFC 310, and maybe he gets asked about that, but he's already said that Conor won't return until the back end of 2025. I'm not sure if this was a timeline set with this potential outcome already in mind. I struggle to see a world where the UFC just completely cuts ties with him, even though maybe you could make an argument this is probably like the perfect time to do something like that if you want to send a statement to the public, to your roster, all that kind of stuff about what behaviors or situations may or may not be allowed. But we know Conor McGregor operates under a different set of rules, so we don't really know what's going to happen there. But going forward with like the appeal, Eric McGracken, who does great work like with legal stuff on X and in the MMA community, kind of stated he thinks it would be a bad idea to go forward with the appeal process, just because then you're rehashing this news cycle for a second, potentially third time. And if it doesn't go your way, that's even more damning on the situation. So it's going to be interesting to see how they proceed. Of course, you see Conor out there posting tweets about it, long tweets, long statement kind of things, and a lot of arguments to be made on whether that's a detriment or a benefit to his situation. So there's still a lot of moving parts here. Of course, as Nolan kind of said at the end there, the most important thing is this is the a stain on his legacy and kind of his brand that's hard to remove. Even if he was to win an appeal or something, it's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube when it comes to something like this. People see the first set of headlines, they see, rapists, all these type of things, and they just kind of put that attachment in their mind forever. It's hard to put that back. So that's going to be the biggest thing he's dealing with going forward, because obviously this is not a criminal case. He's not facing jail time. The big out, $250,000, I imagine, is not a devastating blow to Conor McGregor's bottom line. So now it's a question of reputational damage, and I think that's the biggest thing he deals with going forward.
Mm-hmm. Danton, let's hear your reaction. Very disappointing for sure to get this news last week. What are your thoughts?
First off, sentiment what Nolan said. Shout out to everybody that's doing reporting on this and the good reporting as well. I think it's really going to be a litmus test building off of what Mike Bond just said, right? Because you're going to watch that, right? Like, I don't disagree with Mike, by the way. That's kind of where I see it, right? These two different kind of justice systems. And unfortunately, I don't really see it leaving too much of a stain as much as it should, which, by the way, if you want to remind yourself of humanity, just look at the comments of any of this coverage and you can kind of remind yourself the humanity that exists out there. But for what she's getting and having to go through this poor woman, like, man, it folks, it ain't worth it. Trust me, it ain't worth it. So shouts to her and her courage, shouts to the people covering it. But unfortunately, I don't know if it's going to be that much of a stain outside of Ireland, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Irish folks, but Conor doesn't have as bright of a reputation there even before this stuff, right? Now that it's actually getting confirmed, you do wonder what will happen there. But if you look at, everybody from the UFC president, and not to get political, but it's apropos to the president of the United States, like, you could do some really awful stuff to women or otherwise, and sadly, it's not going to affect your position. So I would just look at it more like a litmus test, almost like what Mike was saying. You're going to be able to see how different people are reacting to this. And one last thing, guys, I'm not even a big video game guy, but Mike brought it up. I thought it was interesting because I'm not a big video game guy, but one of the few video games I will dabble on is Hitman. And I may or may not have went on last night / the wee hours this morning. And they still got advertisements, and they call Conor, by the way, the disruptor. They keep the Reebok fight kit, the tattoos, everything. And they just call him the disruptor. And it just says, the disruptor is coming. And I'm like, first of all, phrasing, guys, not really sensitive to what's going on. But no, secondly, well, they haven't pulled him yet. I'm keeping my eye out for that too. Are they, if, when, right? Not that I'm some pro clutcher, but I mean, come on, guys, can we at least take down the Conor McGregor is coming over the headline? That's easy. Yeah. That's all I got.
Speaking of coming, Come in the chat room says Mike Tyson raped a woman and went to prison for it, and Dana still worships him. And I was thinking of something, because the next question would be to this panel, right? Legacy, and how will this affect him? But it is true. Mike Tyson, in a criminal case, was found guilty, did time about 30 years ago, and since then came out, boxed again in his, not his prime years. I think he lost some of that, but still was in some high profile matchups, then did some movies, now a successful podcaster. You see what he did recently at the age of 58, and he's beloved. So guys, real quick, the legacy thing, is this just something that hurts him now, but in the end, we'll all remember the impact he had on our sport? Or do you think this is just different times, and maybe this one will carry longer? Let's start with Mike.
Yeah, it's different times. It's too soon to tell, I think, to be honest with there. If Conor goes the rest of his life without another situation similar or in the same sphere, yeah, maybe the road to kind of eroding what this meant for your name and your brand is possible. But that was a long road for Mike Tyson, man. He did, as you kind of listed a lot of stuff there, felt like kind of The Hangover was maybe a turning point for him. He had his one-man show for a while there. There's a lot of stuff he did that went into his rehabilitation process. And that was also in a different world, right? That was pre-social media, pre all the stuff that we have now that kind of gives a lot more people opinions and ways of looking at things or framing things. So definitely a different world, but obviously I wasn't there when the Mike Tyson verdict came down and how people reacted in the immediate aftermath and what it was like, but you kind of see this there. And as Dan said, maybe it doesn't it doesn't seem already like it's doing the worst for him. I don't know, UFC hasn't even commented on this situation, and technically, they have a very tough branding on Conor right now in his name. So I think it's possible, but I think they're kind of at two different starting points with their situation too.
I think Mike covered it well. Nolan, if you want to chime in, that's fine. But I also want you to address, does this even dampen the interest in a return of Conor McGregor?
Yeah, I mean, that last question is something that can always be debated, right? I mean, when somebody's name, I think for a lot of people it does. But again, the fact that there's so many moving parts, right? Will we ever see Conor fight again? It's keeps coming to my brain too, forgetting about the UFC. But I think there'll obviously be a lot of attention, whether or not things that are awful in life bring more attention than they should. I think we've all seen that with social media and stuff. Sometimes it's not necessarily about who deserves the most attention, but it's about who gets the most attention. So, I mean, he'll obviously, no matter till the day he dies, if he fights once, if he fights 10 more times, I think he'll always bring in giant amounts of eyeballs. I think that's just the reality of this all. But I do think Mike was saying, it is very hard to place how this incident will impact how we look at him 20 years from now, how the history books will write about him. But I do think the fact that there has been kind of this rise and fall and this sort of, character became a person, became somebody that seemed out of controls and a little off the rails. This is kind of the pinnacle of that. I think this is the worst thing that's kind of happened or has been proven to happen, or he's been, found liable of or whatever. So I think this fits that trend though. And I think that trend will, at this point in time, unless there's some sort of pivot to the right or the left, kind of to get off this road, I do think that his kind of erratic behavior in becoming this character that we thought was kind of an act, and now it seems like it's kind of gotten a little out of control. I do think that will be a big part of his story. Will this, how much will this specific incident weigh into everything? Who knows? And to be honest with you, I would love to be able to say that we aren't going to run into anything else legal related with Conor McGregor, any sort of controversy. I would love that. But only time will be able to tell if that's the way that things are going to play out or not. So I guess ask me this question in 20 years and I'll give you a good answer.
We're going to be friends in 20 years, just making sure, because every time I start that Boston banner. Yeah.
Hey man, you guys keep winning that
like
in-season tournament. I'm not going to talk to you anymore.
Dodgers, baby. What about the Dodgers? All right. Listen, Fuzzy1Z says the majority of Irish folk don't like his wild behavior at all because they are some of the finest people on earth. I've heard that a lot before, that country is split on McGregor. A lot of people aren't fans of him at all, and then others obviously are. We obviously come and run in the circles of the ones that make it all the way to Vegas. And if you've made it this far, I imagine it's the cheer, not the protest. Dan, one last one for you. Is this, because you follow pop culture, some hoops, combat sports, this fall from grace, is this one of the biggest ones you've ever seen?
Again, it should be, between the amount of numbers of things, like Nolan said, we could have a whole segment just kind of reading his rap sheet, right? But let's not forget, guys, it wasn't just 1 year ago where someone else very popular in the space was on camera abusing a woman, his own wife. And we voted for that person to be man of the year that same year, this very space. So yeah, I am not holding my breath sadly for this to change too much of how people are going to, at least the majority of people are probably going to look at Conor.
Mm-hmm. And George, not to jump in too much, but I just do want to give 2 shout outs. Paul Healy from the Irish Mirror, he gave detailed play-by-play of every day at the courtroom with times and everything. So if people are interested in supremely detailed, breakdowns of what happened, that's one person. And then Frank Greeny from the Irish Times did a great breakdown with Luke Thomas yesterday. Mm-hmm. He's been covering it as well for them. So I just want to give a shout out to those 2, because I think those were 2 people that really helped my understanding of not only what was going on, but what it meant as well.
Yeah. And word on the street is, for you YouTubers, 1.5 times is your friend. Thank you, Mike Bond, for that one. I forgot that one existed, and it's not a shot at those people that created the content. It's just long content, but you can get through it still. Go ahead, Mike. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, definitely go watch that conversation with Luke. It's on his YouTube channel. And one of I think the big takeaways coming from that, from just kind of the perspective people have on Nikita Hammond, whether this was a money grab or one of those things. If she had lost this and they had ruled against her, she would have been culpable to pay all the legal fees for the entire thing, including Conor McGregor's side, which from what they said in that conversation could have got over €1 million. And she ended up getting 250K ish in that range. So if you feel the risk of losing this significantly outweighed the benefit of the win here. So I guess keep that in mind when discussing or thinking about the motives behind this.